The following episode of the Intrepid podcast was written and recorded before a Philippine Congressional Committee began inquiring about the partisan activities of several content creators, vloggers, and other social media personalities who supported former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte, who is now in the custody of the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes against humanity. What you will hear is a thoroughly edited version of the original recording I made a few weeks ago, reflecting not only the changes in the topic, but also some personal updates. For a full context of what I discussed, I invite you to support me through my crowdfunding pages on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Ko-Fi. The links to them are in the YouTube description and on the Spotify and Substack show notes. And now, without further ado, Episode 18 of the Intrepid podcast. Imagine this. There are two sides of a canyon or two banks of a river, with its narrowest part only connected by a tightrope. One side is where journalists and other traditional media practitioners are located, while social media content creators and other broadcasting and press rejects thrive on the other side. Below and in between is the chasm of misinformation. Soon enough, several journalists and broadcasters crossed the tightrope to the other side since they saw how the content creators are getting on with their lives with the technologies they have been bestowed with. These journos realized the capacity the creators are harnessing and have made it their lives' mission to improve the connection and at least build a hanging bridge to make sure anyone from both sides can cross without the risk of falling. Realizing this, some creators helped out in making it sturdy and stable so that it wouldn't be a one-way bridge. However, not everyone was happy on both sides. Journalists criticized the fact that their noble profession may be tainted with individuals who were not trained enough for the craft, while creators became concerned that journalists becoming creators themselves would threaten their audience reach. Digital news reporting and storytelling has been dominating social media this decade, and there is an observed trend in the media industry in the past few years. Journalists from established media outlets quit their jobs to go independent, free from censorship and corporate interest, but may run the risk of revealing their biases. And on the other hand, social media content creators who may or may not have tried entering news organizations to become involved in the noble profession of journalism express their frustration by or redirect their creative pursuits to making high-quality content even if they are, for the most part, unrecognized for such. And this only begs the question, what if traditional and freelance journalists did not see journalistic content creators as competition but as collaborators, especially because the lines between their professions are beginning to blur if it hasn't already? And if so, is there a possibility for people in both professions to meet in the middle of a steady bridge? This is what we'll talk about on this episode of the Intrepid podcast, and it starts right now. Hi, I'm Ian Riñon, and I don't know if I could still consider myself an independent alternative media practitioner among other things due to my apparent non-involvement with the media scene in the Philippines as of this episode. And the next best things to it are my content creation and podcasting gigs, as well as my former job as a news writer as part of a virtual newsroom for a media outlet overseas. Either way, welcome to another episode of the Intrepid podcast. And before we start, some housekeeping things to sort out. I would like to take this opportunity to promote myself through my social media handles on Facebook, X/Twitter, and Instagram. This podcast is also uploaded on YouTube, Spotify, and Substack for your convenience. Now, to understand the role digital media is doing in linking journalists and content creators together, as well as bridging the gap between traditional and social media, it is important to understand what could be the catalyst of the connection between the old and new way of telling stories. Ever since the dawn of the internet, people have been able to publish their thoughts and have a higher chance of people seeing their message compared with traditional media like books, the newspaper, the radio, and the television, which were already having trouble retaining an audience for its precarious situation in balancing its advertising space and airtime anyway. In short, the internet made it possible for blogs, social media, and independent news organizations to democratize the way information is being shared to the public that traditional outlets have no choice but to play second fiddle to. And there is a term for it. It's called citizen journalism. Fast forward to recent years, and everyone who had some kind of involvement in the Filipino media industry witnessed the broadcast shutdown of ABS-CBN in 2020. Since then, some of the network's journalists have either stayed, moved on to other networks or fields altogether, or transitioned into freelancing, while ABS-CBN itself and other media organizations transitioned into the digital space to continue its operations, albeit in a smaller reach than what it had in broadcast media. This singular event, and perhaps we can also connect the pandemic here, seemed to be the nail in the coffin of traditional media after years of stagnation and stereotypes. And yet, Sari Manok-like, ABS-CBN did fully return to the airwaves around 2 years ago, but this time as an airtime renter to multiple other media networks. Well, you know what? It's better than nothing. And by the way, the Sari Manok is basically the Maranao version of the legendary bird called the phoenix, which, as we all know, is known for its cycle of fiery death and rebirth. Now, at the same time, some Filipino content creators who might not have been fortunate enough to be involved in the local media industry in any capacity have since picked up the slack and developed a journalistic fervor in their work that the best of them have given traditional news organizations and even freelance journalists a run for their money, specifically in more recent issues and topics. The trend may have originated overseas with YouTubers like Gen Kimura, Johnny Harris, and Dylan Page, although Johnny Harris is a bit questionable sometimes, but you know what? He has a journalistic background, but whatever. All of them have been recently noted and viewed for their journalistic content while having little to no involvement in the traditional media industry. Either way, independent journalism, either by network veterans or passionate creators, has proven itself an important aspect of free speech, especially in places where traditional media is normally owned, operated, or controlled by the government, and at the same time, it's also vital for societies who still have to struggle with considering what to consider as free speech or not. With that said, many former network journalists have since moved on to other things, but a few of them, like Jackie Manabat, transformed journalism into a more relatable profession. Manabat left ABS-CBN in 2023 after 17 years as a reporter in the network. She has since built her multimedia venture as an independent, and she is focusing on topics like women and active mobility, to name a few. Prior to that, her former Kapamilya colleague Christian Esguerra left the network to join Press 1 PH as a news podcast host and investigative journalist. On the other hand, inside the network atmosphere, some reporters have been venturing into helping other people start a career in journalism, or at least write better articles and stories. One such case is GMA journalist Cara David, while others balance their serious journalistic work by creating their own vlog-type content. Meanwhile, veterans in the field have also been passing on their knowledge and wisdom to the younger generation of storytellers as a testament to how journalism evolved throughout their lifetimes. In late 2024, former Reuters journalist Manny Mogato released his first memoir called It's Me Book, which highlighted some of the key moments of his life and career. From starting out as a propaganda writer during the first Marcos administration to stowing himself away on a Philippine Air Force plane to cover a hostage situation in Zamboanga, to working for the Japanese news outlet Asahi Shimbun to his Pulitzer Prize winning story about the Duterte war on drugs that exposed him and his colleagues to death threats. Also in late 2024, a Rappler article highlighted the story of two independent journalists turned creators based in Cebu who are somehow shaping the local journalism landscape. They are former Bombo Radio broadcaster Jason Monteclar and former ABS-CBN Cebu reporter and radio station manager Leo Lastimosa. On the flip side of things, the internet has since given rise to ordinary people who seek popularity by voicing out their perspectives and sometimes that of their audience and close associates through social media. For long-form content and podcasts, there's YouTube and Spotify. Duh, I'm on YouTube and Spotify, by the way, so yeah, duh. For shorter bite-sized content, there's Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and X, but not on TikTok for cybersecurity reasons. I hope you understand. Now, if you prefer old-fashioned reading, just like me, come on. I know I am on the cusp of being a Gen Zer, but I am actually one of the last of the millennials. I was born in 92, so that makes me one of the last of the millennials. And yeah, I still prefer old-fashioned reading than in this case. And people like me can do so on Blogspot, WordPress, Medium, or even Substack, which I know I'm sounding like I'm product placing myself on this, but I am on Substack, and I might also expand the Intrepid files. Basically, that's my blog, to the other platforms that I've mentioned and more. And also, many creators employ a multi-pronged approach for a wider reach and in order to gauge where they are thriving and where they are lacking engagement. But there is a common observation that these creators often begin either as gamers or as vloggers and then develop and diverge into several focuses, such as politics, pop culture, social commentary, or a hybrid approach. In time, their clout will either bring them to popularity or to notoriety. One of the international examples of a content creator developing journalistic prowess is British TikTok film and TV viewer Shiv Reddy. She revealed to Journal Resources in September last year, in September 2024 that is, for those who are listening after March 2025, that she experiences imposter syndrome given her lack of a formal journalism background. Yet, Shiv's review of the South by Southwest Festival entry Monkey Man and earned her the opportunity to interview the film's director, Dev Patel. And who could ever forget that it was Joe Rogan, a UFC commentator turned podcaster, who became the catalyst in bringing Donald Trump back to the White House in the 2024 U.S. election. It is understood that Trump guested on Rogan's show while Democratic Party nominee and then Vice President Kamala Harris declined Rogan's invitation. And if I am not mistaken, there's been a war of words, or there's actually an exchange on social media between Harris and Rogan about the podcast episode of the Joe Rogan Experience that never happened. So, yeah, it's a different kind of worms in itself. Locally, content creators like Paulul and Nico David have since mixed entertainment and memes with social commentaries. Then, the powerful comics man Gerald Dorado and local stand-up comedian Chris Bacula have joined forces in creating Sausawan podcast, which delves into a Rogan style of program. And there's also Celine and Dennis Murillo, who use their love for nature and traveling to document the biodiversity and natural heritage of the Philippines. And you know, these are just the creators that I have on top of my head and on my script. So there are a lot of others out there who who somehow delve into journalistic content without being journalists themselves. So, there's a lot of potential out there. But then again, the journalistic profession has an invisible barrier that only a few, if any, can pass through from the content creation sphere, and there is a reason why. The invisible barrier preventing content creators from becoming journalists is shaped by the fact that the profession involves strict ethical standards. This barrier also reveals the notoriety and bias of some of the political commentators and influencers in the environment. Recently, the progressive political commentator Stephen Kenneth Bonnell II, known for his screen name Destiny, and I don't know why he used that screen name, has been alleged to have leaked revenge pornography content which strengthened his already established notoriety as a sexual degenerate. In late January 2025, a YouTuber named President Sunday released a 22.5-minute-long video exposing Bonnell's alleged practice of recording the people who he engages in sexual acts without their consent. One of such videos allegedly involved far-right counterpart Nick Fuentes, himself a controversial personality in his own right that has since been the subject of at least one assassination attempt, and Lauren Southern, who he had a pact with to ditch their respective partners to get into a relationship. It is understood that Bonnell and his now Swedish ex-wife Melina Goransson were in an quote-unquote open marriage prior to their divorce. And in speaking of assassination attempts, Bonnell became notorious for gloating over the death of Cory Comparator after he was struck by a bullet that was supposed to kill Trump when he was still campaigning for a second term in mid-2024. A few weeks after that, nuclear fallout happened. A content nuke was dropped on Bonnell and former The Young Turks employee and leftist political streamer Hassan Piker. Both Destiny and Hassan are actually feuding over each other for some reason, and yet both of them have been content nuked. So that's ironic. But Hassan also happened to be the nephew of the Young Turks presenter Cenk Uygur, and some of the comment section on Twitch or on YouTube or anywhere exchanged the name Hassan Piker with Cenk's nephew, because that's the fact. Now, Piker, a Turkish Muslim with anti-American sentiments, was notorious for gloating over the October 7th Hamas attack on southern Israel, which killed over 1,000 Israelis and took hundreds more hostage, prompting H3H3 showrunner Ethan Klein, a leftist Jewish American, to drop the content nuke on Piker. In the local scene, what seems to be the barrier that kept journalistic content creators from being taken seriously is the fact that so many social media influencers either develop into creating Mr. Beast type content given Jimmy Donaldson's questionable practices and associates, venture into business allegedly as an act of selling out, engage in political partisanship, or outrightly run for politics. There are so many cases of this, but this episode is already long enough for me, and editing an hour-long video, hopefully not, would not be very helpful for my own mental health. So I'll leave it at that. While traditional journalism also had its untoward practices in the past and questionable ones in the present, it has since developed standards everyone in the industry must comply to. And at the same time, creators who seek to reach such look forward to practice in their work even if their prospects of getting into a newsroom is an impossible long shot. So, the question now is this. Is it possible for local journalists and content creators to meet in the middle as the lines between their industries begin to blur? And the answer is, only time will tell. But one thing is for certain. The road from being a journalist to becoming a vlogger or content creator is relatively easy. The other way around is hard. especially for those seeking to become journalistic in their content creation and those who transition from a makeshift studio to a real newsroom. In conclusion, journalism is a profession that is currently evolving as people shift from looking for news and perspectives on traditional media to doing so on websites, blogs, and social media posts and videos. What can be considered the common consensus here is the hope that industry-trained journalists and journalistic content creators will continue to stabilize the bridge they have already built and build one another through the rich expertise both groups possess. Because at the end of the day, both journalists and content creators have the chasm of misinformation as a common enemy. And to win over it, they must keep the bridge steady and steady enough to meet in the middle. And on that note, I end today's podcast. I would like to thank you all for listening and for listening to my ramblings in extension. Now, the recording of this episode would be available on YouTube, Spotify, and Substack, with further plans to expand to other platforms, so please make sure to check out for that. All of the materials I have referenced for this episode would be listed in the recording's description and in the Spotify and Substack show notes. If you think there are things I might not have included in this recording, or if you want to have your say about the matter, please feel free to leave them in the comments below if applicable. And before you go, please make sure to like this video if you are on YouTube and share this around, and subscribe to my channel Intrepid Ian Riñon, and ring the notification bell by selecting all so you wouldn't miss whatever future content I may create. Please follow me along as well on Spotify for more podcast episodes, as well as on my Substack called The Intrepid Files for some of the content I may or may not use as video or audio content. So there are selections there, or there are articles there that I have transitioned into YouTube videos or podcast episodes. But there are also some that I have left there on the Substack blog that I have. So do check out the Intrepid Files on Substack. Anyway, I gotta get out of here. With all that said, this is Intrepid Ian Riñon reminding you to, at all times, now more than ever, be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Until then, look alive, stay alive, be kind to yourself and to each other, and as always, thank you for tuning in. From here in Intrepid HQ, see you next time for another talk here on the Intrepid Podcast. Ian out.